picture you.
Oh, I have a bucket of God kids. I don't know why people choose me, but Lord have mercy, I've got a bucket of them.
We pick God kids' best, grandparents' best stuff who's gonna give the best gifts.
Duh.
That's why I was
Yeah.
checking.
You know I'll get gilded into that all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird because I'm Jewish and I keep asking for godparents for my kids.
Would you say you're Jewish?
All right, are we ready to bring it down the home stretch? Might I commend you on your maintenance of energy this afternoon? I think the pep talk worked. Or the Mountain Dew.
And the coffee. Yeah.
And the coffee. Here I thought it was me the whole time.
It was both.
It must have been.
And Tim just growled at Jen.
Oh,
was,
trust me, you'd have to do a lot more than that to get me
I mean,
started.
that's not like the Tim I know,
All
the
right, I'll
loving
work at
Tim.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna take quite a bit.
One
It doesn't
key
work.
topic
Finger.
left for the afternoon, a critical one, Q&A. Q&A, does anyone have any questions? Is not a closing. Sometimes instead of preparing a closing with a specific action, we just end with, does anybody have any questions? Maybe even crossing our fingers that nobody does. Guilty? As charged. We all fall into that, hoping you've gone through everything, hoping no one has any questions because they might be challenging. What if I don't know the answer? What if they can tell I'm nervous? What if they can read that this is intimidating me right now? I knew all of my content so well. What if they throw me something I don't know well, that I haven't rehearsed? Those are the things that happen during Q&A that make us lose our composure. Keep in mind, everything that we've practiced maintains through Q&A. The eye connection, the volume and the inflection, the gestures, you're not off when you've finished your closing. Q&A is your opportunity to continue to have influence. So visualize how these skills would still come into play during the Q&A session. When you're able to apply the skills even during the Q&A interaction, you'll come across so much more professional. That strong executive presence, maintaining your composure that builds credibility. Someone throw me a question, any question about the content from this 2 days. Coach me on how I respond. What questions do you have?
What do you find is the most common, I don't want to say mistake, but area for correction out of most people that train with you?
Well, most people have a really hard time pausing. That's a big one. Pausing can be a problem for a lot of people. What a lot of people struggle with too is eye connection. Eye connection is a big struggle for a lot of people because it just feels too long. I really can't say that there's one specific skill that's a problem. That's why we try to give each one its own attention and the same amount of time during our delivery on day one. But any other questions?
What's missing from your course?
Well, clearly, as being a believer in this course, I don't think anything's missing. I think it's a really comprehensive course. I mean, is there something that you feel is lacking, or?
Well, no, I just wanted to see if based on the courses that you teach, you may get feedback as to some of the things that
No,
are opportunities.
I think it's pretty comprehensive. Anyone else? Okay, coach me.
I just wanted to ask you something that's.
I like it. I like it. A little
Crazy-
challenging.
I like the crazy person defensive.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's funny.
Yeah.
There was a lot of repetition. You repeated your answer.
You didn't
a
give
couple
really an
times
answer.
in the first
I
one.
didn't give much of an answer. Or did I? Did you have a hard time finding it? It was
Yeah,
such a
You
mess.
Ring
spoke
around
real
the
fast.
rosies.
How can you tell I was defensive?
You backed away.
Oh, you caught it. I'm creating as much distance as I can right now because I am intimidated by your question. Stepping back is the dead giveaway that someone is feeling uncomfortable. Stay planted. No matter how hard you feel someone pushing, someone's throwing you a curveball to see how you can handle it, don't backstep. That's real world. I appreciate that. The challenging questions are real world. What else happened that went wrong? I wasn't clear. I rambled. When I got defensive, I stepped back. What else?
Your math was off. A lot of people have this, and then a lot of people have this, and then a lot of other people have this. And I'm like, how many people were in the room?
Well, you've trained a lot of people.
Well, you weren't making eye contact, you were just kind of rapid firing. And you
Aha.
looked down a lot.
Aha. Two common pitfalls with Q&A. We either, who said say it, don't spray it? Is that Anthony?
That's Anthony.
We are so stealing that one. You either spray it to the whole audience, focusing on no one, or what we tend to do is only answer to that questioner. Jennifer throws me a question, and I spend the next 2 minutes reliving this answer, and I just stay with Jennifer the whole entire time. What am I currently inviting everyone else to do?
Check out.
Check out. Well, if she's going to just stay with her, I might as well just pack up my stuff. You're inviting people to disengage. Anything else I did that didn't work for you?
You cut him off before, so he was in the middle of kind of talking and you're like, jumped in there.
And what does that scream?
I don't care about you, I'm not listening to your question.
Don't care, I'm not listening. That could be one perception. What else might it suggest?
You don't want him to finish or say anything more. Like you're afraid of what he's gonna say next,
And why am I afraid?
because you're not prepared.
Not prepared? I could tell he was challenging me.
Not-
What doesn't this include? What do you mean, what doesn't this include? This is the perfect course. I'm feeling defensive. How am I going to defend my course? So rather than just letting him finish, giving that thoughtful acknowledgement to his question and giving myself time to formulate an answer, I jump in and I start answering really fast, because the faster I can start talking, the more I can think on my feet and try to think of a way to answer this question. I'm intimidated. The quicker you start talking, the more uncomfortable you appear. Anything else?
Yeah, at the end of each question, bam, you move down and ask for another question. You gave no pause, no acknowledgement of whether the person understood your answer.
Moving on. Please don't ask me another one.
That's what I was gonna
That
say.
same. All right. That was a disaster. We all acknowledge that. Take 2. Watch for what's different. Then we'll navigate through the how-tos and make it different. What questions do you have?
What's your favorite way to spark the conversation?
My all-time favorite spark is an analogy. Anytime that I can draw a connection between my content and human emotion, it creates an aha moment. And the aha moments are what we go for. It gives it context and relatability. What other questions do you have?
How long will it take us to be as good as you guys?
There is no set amount of time on how quickly you'll develop the skill. I will impress on you, there's only one way that you're going to make it happen. It's going to be with a lot of practice and dedication. Choose to practice the skills, 1 per interaction all day long. You'll be so surprised how quickly the skills become habit. What's happening that's different here? Coach me on what changed.
You're engaging.
How so?
You're responding to the question, to the person that asked the question, and you're welcoming, you're sharing knowledge. I mean, you're leaning towards them. It's not defensive.
So I stay planted. I don't step back. What do I do before I even start speaking?
Pause.
Pause. That thoughtful pause is a critical element to having effective Q&A. That was one of the things that Tim noticed right away. You jump in before they can even finish the question. That tells people I'm not comfortable. A thoughtful pause does 2 things. It quietly validates, that was a good question, without saying, that was a good question. The thoughtful pause adds value to the question. It also gives me time to think. If I start answering right away, I've not given myself any think time. Now what's going to happen is my answer is going to be longer than it needs to be because I didn't give it the thought it deserved. Pause, think, share a part of the first sentence or 2, share the answer with the questioner. Then what do I do?
Engage.
Answer to all. Answer to everyone in the room. In the bad demo, we saw how Jennifer and I just started having this one-on-one. And if I just stay with her, she might then throw me another one, and pretty soon Jennifer and Sarah are having a one-on-one conversation. Everyone else is going to check out. By answering to all, you're including everyone in the answer. What else does that do to my answer? This applies directly to another skill we learned yesterday that we've been pushing home.
Concise.
Why?
Because your sentence moves, so you're finding the end of finding the parody and moving on.
You got it. It's eye connection. I start with one sentence of my answer here, period, and go here to the period, my sentences get shorter. So will my answer. I will give more concise answers by using eye connection. I'll also keep my listeners much more engaged in the process. It becomes a group activity instead of a one-on-one. General how-tos. Main things you do during Q&A to maintain credibility. I stayed open in 2 different ways. By leaving my hands down, not crossing over and stepping back. My body stayed open and relaxed. Staying open verbally happened with my facial expression, keeping a neutral facial expression instead of. Am I looking pretty open to your answer right now? Pretty excited to give you that thoughtful answer? No, I'm not buying in. I'm wishing you had an answer. Be aware of what facial expressions you make when you're not open. Similar but different. Be aware in general what your facial expressions say about how you're feeling at the moment. I didn't know until I received feedback that when I'm being thoughtful, I'm struggling to grasp a new concept, I get an angry face. I had no idea I did it. To me, it's just my thinking face. Now, if I'm the questioner or being questioned, if you just threw me a question and I put on my thinking face, it could be perceived as non-receptive to the question. But be aware, ask for feedback. Does my facial expression come across that I'm open to this process? Ask someone you trust. We covered answering to all. That promotes the eye connection. It also helps us stay brief. Short, clear, concise answers. Ask for clarification only if you need it. Why do I say only if you need it? Where's that coming from?
Don't do it to buy time.
Yes. Throw me a question.
What kind of rules might you give at the beginning of a conference call?
Well, what Sarah wanted to know, if I'm understanding you correctly, you want to know what specific rules that I lay down at the beginning of a conference call? Buying time. I'm not 100% sure how to answer. I'll just repeat that question or ask her to clarify it so I can think in the moment. People will catch on in a heartbeat. You will lose credibility in a second. Don't buy time. The ways we buy time are asking for unnecessary clarification, repeating a question for no purpose, saying good question. Saying good question can be perceived as just buying time. That's a very good question.
And I wish I had
Really
the
good
answer to.
question. I'm really glad you asked that question, as I'm just trying really hard to come up with something.
But at the same time, though, look, if you're excited to get the question, and you say, "Oh, that's a great question," right? And you have that different inflection and facial expression. Is that still a bad thing?
It can be. I won't say it's a hard and fast rule. Here's the couple things that I suggest. One, if I say, "I'm so glad you asked that. It's a common thing we run into all the time." And I go around to the how-tos. Jennifer throws me a question. Good question. The future courses that we offer after you complete this. Sarah throws me a question. No, we don't offer that. See what happens?
Yes.
You run the risk of validation, blank answer. Do you run the risk of offending or leaving someone feel like, oh, I
That was
finally
not a
found the
good question.
courage to speak up and it wasn't a good question?
So maybe the Lord next time not to ask.
I knew, I didn't
It's a
know.
generic response to questions.
It's very generic.
Yeah.
It's really meaningless. Second point I wanted to make about that, if you connect, stay open, answer to all in the room, Check back into that questioner for some non-verbal closure, just a simple head nod. Stay open it up for the next question. You have told that person through your poised and professional response, that was a good question. How you manage the question tells them that was a valuable question. You don't have to tell them with your words. Show them with how you manage it.
How about validating it after your response? How do you feel about that? So after you've given the answer,
Meaning, did I answer your
you
question?
would close out your response with, that was a good question, or I'm glad you asked that.
No need.
Yeah.
Don't need to.
No need.
Okay.
Nope, have confidence in your answer, which also addresses doing all the skills, check back in with my questioner. Did I answer your question? What did I just do to myself?
Undermine your credibility.
Undermine my own credibility. Have confidence in your answer. Your confidence will skyrocket when you use these skills. And stay open, non-verbally check in with just a brief head nod, and open it back up. That creates that closure without undermining your own message or your own confidence by saying, did I answer that for you? Now, if you come back to your questioner and they have a look of confusion on their face, maybe you didn't. Stay with their eyes, other questions or clarifications. Do it in an open-ended way without undermining your own confidence and quality of your answer. Check in, read them. If you feel they need more, open it up, give them the opportunity to express that. Be honest. Have you ever, show of hands, been in a situation where you knew someone was winging the answer and they didn't really know it? Every hand went up. How does that leave you as one of the participants in the room feeling about that interaction? They lose credibility. Yeah.
It's more about how you feel about the person than the event, because that lasts longer.
The thing is, you work so hard. Everything we've taught you up until 2:30 on Tuesday afternoon is all about building credibility. In a minute, by winging it, that credibility can go out the window. This is the end of your conversation. Maintaining it at this point is critical. The smallest behaviors can lose you the very credibility you have worked so hard to establish at that point. Don't wing it. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. The truth is, nobody expects you to know every single answer that comes your way. Now, you might have some toughies in the room that really want to see you work through it, really want to throw you that curveball. We'll get to that in a moment, managing those difficult questions. For the most part, people want to see you succeed. They want to see you get through the interaction successfully. But don't wing it. If you don't know, that's okay. Now, do you have to say, I don't know? No, become a resource. Somebody, let's imagine, someone just threw me a question about Stacy Hunky Inc.'s social media campaign strategy. I play no role in it at all. I could go, it's not my department, it's not something I'm actively involved in, so I'm not sure. Or, take two, Stacy Hunky Inc. has a strong social media campaign. We've got a contact in Chicago who heads up the entire process. She has a very succinct strategy. I would be happy to put you in touch with her by Friday. She can answer every question that you have. What other questions do you have? See how I became a resource instead of just I don't know? In the moment where you know you don't know the answer, send your mind searching for how you can become a resource to that person. Chances are you know someone who does. Be a resource to the questioner.
I missed it. So was that the answer to all bullet? What was that one?
That was being honest. When you don't know, it's okay not to know. Be a resource and offer to put them in touch with the right people. So quick recap for Anthony. When someone throws you a question, be brief. Connect with your questioner, sentence or two. Answer to all, a sentence at a time. check back in with that questioner non-verbally with a head nod for some closure. Be honest, stay open with your body, avoid closing yourself off that would suggest you're feeling defensive or nervous. It's about where we're at right now. You caught on right away when I started answering, help me with your first name again, our guest.
Gamal?
Gamal. When he threw me that challenging question, I gave it away that I was feeling defensive. What does being defensive look and sound like? Not just in what I showed you, but what do you see in others? Or what do you know about yourself? How do you know you're feeling defensive? How do you know someone else is?
The pace of their answer gets very brisk.
Mm-hmm. They're pacing. They speed up the way they talk, because the faster they can get the answer out, the more they can move on. There's one that they're really uncomfortable answering.
And I know I tend to repeat myself.
Yes.
It's like, okay, you didn't hear me the first time, let me try this again. Back up.
This applies to not just Q&A. Everything we've taught you up until this point, Carolyn, say it once and say it well. Concise, eye connection, some passion and inflection to the period. That applies with your answers too. Say it once and say it well.
Body language.
What body language behaviors suggest defensiveness?
You did the
Closing
stepping
off.
back, but also the shoulder slump or facial expression or
Yes.
deep breath.
Here are a couple that come next level. Someone's learned to manage them or knows they should manage them.
Is that grabbing the sleeves?
See it? Mhm. Or if I don't grab my sleeves,
Oh, and this.
feel that?
They're channeling it.
Yes, I need somewhere for this energy to go, so I'm driving it into my fist because I'm feeling really nervous. Men, see the deep breath and the finger tap? Usually says, I'm not really sure. Thinking of something really fast. Women, clinging fast to the quadricep. All of these behaviors, they're much more subtle. They will tell your listeners that you're feeling nervous. Women will also adjust their hair. Things like that. Those are all nervous behaviors. In the moment, if you feel the challenging question coming your way, plant your feet, shake your fingertips out. Keep your hands relaxed at your side. Anything that happens as a nervous reaction, your listeners will pick up on in a moment. Some people get red, tough to manage. The only way you can really get your head around it is deep breathing. Take that deep breath. Pause more in the answer so that the breath goes in deeper. Unnecessarily repeating questions is just fine time. How do we replace that?
Pause.
Pause. It's kind of becoming the answer for everything, isn't it? Just pause. The more silence you give yourself before you start your answer, the more in control of your answer you'll be. Don't fill it with the unnecessary repeating or the validation. Just pause, connect with eyes, and start delivering your answer.
How long a pause is an okay pause?
There's no magic answer to that. Sometimes you genuinely need more time to think. That's okay. Give yourself however much time you need. In the moment, you'll feel if it's getting to be too long. If you're still struggling to find the answer and discovering you just don't know how to answer it, own it. That's where you opt for becoming a resource instead of trying to come up with the answer. Now, sometimes people, next level, use that pause for effect because it's a powerful question. Because it got the attention of everyone in the room, they use it to their advantage by taking a really thoughtful pause before they answer.
Controlling it.
What things start to happen in the room that become a distraction? We started this conversation during visual aids this morning. Things start happening. People can sense it's the end of the meeting. Maybe you've been sitting for the whole day, starting to get antsy. What are some of the distracting frustrating behaviors you have to manage a lot of times during Q&A. They sometimes crop up right during our message. Some happen during the Q&A process. Oh, there you go.
Get the books ready.
Nice
get the-
demo, Sarah. Good demo. Distracting
She
behavior.
says over.
You stack those books.
Let me just throw this away.
Yeah, cleaning up her space. That's funny. That happens
No
all
mess
the
mousing.
time.
We are mess mouses, so.
I thought yesterday was way worse. Yesterday was driving me nuts. This is.
That is funny. It was funny when you did
I think
that.
it's because I can see that.
What else? What other distracting behaviors do you have to deal with in the moment when you're also trying to manage questions?
Start playing with their devices.
Checking emails.
Checking
A
emails.
little
see if
bit
I
more
need to be
side
next.
conversation. We're headed out. You know, run. You going straight home after this? You going back upstairs?
I'm back upstairs.
Back upstairs. Don't tell them I'm just leaving. Okay, all right.
I mean, you could just kind of tell when people start to glaze over. They're done. They're
Yeah,
done.
we're done.
Yeah,
We're done. I got what I needed.
So,
What about interactively during that Q&A process? What happens?
There's not a lot of eye contact.
They want you to stop, they want it to be, they want you to finish,
Yeah.
so they won't look at you.
Yeah. No eye contact.
disengagement.
Hostile towards the asker, you know, it's like.
Yeah, or like really.
That sounds like really personal.
Let's address that one. It's an important one. Challenging question, hostile toward the speaker. I can't wait to push their buttons. I have a lot of emotion around this topic. There's a method for handling really difficult questions. You can tell, you know in a split second one is coming your way. Anytime you feel the challenging question coming your way, what do you feel right here? It stirs an emotion, doesn't it? There's your sign to think ARC. A-R-C. Some call this method bridge to benefits. We call it ARC. You feel the emotion. Someone threw you the curveball. I think ARC. Here's how to manage it. What might the A stand for? That challenger, what do they need? They need acknowledgement. Come up with a sincere, succinct acknowledgement. Let's work through this out loud. Who has a common objection that has some heat behind it that you commonly have to work through? What kind of pushback do you get from a challenger?
You can't recapture my money because the BTC gave it to me for this year for my project.
That's pushback. You can't recapture my money. The BTC gave it to me for this project. Hear the heat? How do we acknowledge that, Ron? Let's work through it.
It's the BTC's money.
Whoa. I'm not sure that's an acknowledgement. That might be I'll push right back. So how can you acknowledge that? Think of acknowledgement as the wet cloth that you put on the flame. That curveball is heated. You need to snuff it out, dampen it. How can you briefly, succinctly, and sincerely acknowledge that?
Could you say
Don't
something like
understand
that's a common misconception? Or does that cause too much? Is it showing that they're wrong?
You're on the right track, but rather than calling it a misconception, saying that could suggest you don't understand this right, how could we reword that to validate the concern?
You blame it on your, well, you don't, you somewhat blame it on yourself and you know, well, I apologize for not making myself clear, or I apologize that our staff did not properly
Let's keep
portray the
digging.
message.
Let's keep digging.
I'd probably go for more, I appreciate the way that you're feeling responsibility for the money that you've been entrusted with.
Yeah.
That's an acknowledgement.
Oh,
I appreciate that, the way you're feeling a level of responsibility here. Or you could try, that can feel frustrating. Give me the pushback one more time so I can come up with the right words.
You can't recapture my money. It's mine to spend the way I want to.
Mhm. It can feel frustrating to sense that we're trying to control what money's been granted to you. That's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a big long, listen to the difference. You're right. It can be so frustrating when you're given this money, you've been entrusted with it, and it just seems like no matter what happens, everybody's trying to pull it back and control what you do with it. How frustrating. That happened with me once. See what happens?
Yeah.
Shh. It can be frustrating. That's enough. One sentence, maybe two. Just acknowledging, I get why you might be frustrated. Without saying, I understand, I feel your pain, because you don't. That heated person now could say, no you don't. You're the one trying to tell me what to do with it. Flame just got bigger. So find a way to make the flame smaller. Use that damp cloth of acknowledgement to bring the flame down. Nicely done. Really succinct. Once you've created that acknowledgement, now you can generate your It can be frustrating to be given money and entrusted with it and feel like people are trying to control it, period.
If we think about the bigger picture, if we all don't contribute money that we may not need to a central place, it doesn't do the portfolio any good.
Period. Nice. Thinking about the bigger picture, allotting these funds. See how nicely that worked? Encouraging them to embrace the bigger picture. What didn't Ron say that would have done him a disservice at the beginning of his response? It can be frustrating.
But.
Listen how this changes. It can be frustrating to be entrusted with this money than trying to take it back and it be controlled. But if we think about the bigger picture, see how it takes it away? But and however are just a pause. You didn't do it, kudos. And then the most critical part of ARC, can't skip it. Connect back to a key benefit. Remember how we talked about closings, how you always finish in that closing with benefits? Let the last thing they hear, what's in it for them if they do. Okay, Ron, you're on. Thinking about the bigger picture, we all, and then what happens if we do?
If you find that you need your money returned to you later in the year, we'll review your scope and talk about it.
Review your scope and talk about it. Is that going to resonate as a benefit with them? If they allocate the funds, what direct benefit do they stand to gain? Just one of yours from your opening.
That we'll be able to launch a new project that's important to our leaders.
There we go. And is launching a new project important to our leaders, important to these listeners? Will that resonate with them?
There's money in the
Could be, it depends.
Okay. Make sure you pull from your key benefits that you used in your opening and closing. Make one of them be your tie-in.
I think what I used in the longer one is, you'll have adequate funding for your project, you just won't be hanging on to money that you don't need.
There you go. Adequate funding for future projects. Make sure what you want to tie back into the benefits you've been referring to in the conversation you just had. You start pulling a new benefit in, you stand to discredit or put less value on the ones you focused on in the conversation themselves. Be thinking in your response about which benefit you've already verbalized this ties back to. Usually just 2 or 3 of them to choose from. Acknowledge, respond, connect to benefits. Only when it's challenging. If it's not a challenging question, we don't need to use ARC. Just answer, do the other skills. The minute you feel the challenging feeling come inside, think ARC. That's how we handle the hostile participant. Any other distracting behaviors that you can think of that are really tough to manage? Recurring distractions at the end of your conversation. Most of these can be managed with the very skills you've already learned. Use the skills to manage the behavior. Remember yesterday, Tim, when I had you look down? I used what 2 skills to move toward Tim to bring him back in? Remember?
You stared at me.
I used eye connection, even though I didn't have eyes,
Physically, kind
and movement. Used Arc and Park.
Okay.
Play along with me, Tara. Go on your computer. I'm delivering from this side of the room, sharing some thoughts with different eyes on this side of the room. Tara is tapping away on her computer. She's done with Q&A, wants nothing to do with it. I want her back in. I'm going to look first, and as I'm responding, I'll include Tara in one of my responses to the other participant when they threw it out there. I used eye connection as I walked over. Could you feel it? The very movement alone. Now, do I have to stay here and just deliver to the side of Tara's head until she looks up? No, because the audible element alone is going to bring her. She's going to hear me come this way. She's going to feel my presence. Most people will just stop and look up. Here's the thing with all of these distracting behaviors in general. You have to decide on the thermostat, on the scale, from doing nothing to doing something aggressive, finding the level in between what works. If the behavior is only distracting you, let it go. Go find other places to connect, spend your time elsewhere. You can include that person briefly, and go back and just keep doing your thing. Let it roll. If it's distracting someone else in the room, you have to intervene. That's when you have to decide, how much do I need to do? So start low stakes first. What of the skills would be low stakes to bring people back in from cleaning up or packing, a sidebar conversation, any of these challenges? What's a gentle intervention? What's a 1 or 2? 3 maybe.
Pause.
Pause falls higher.
I thought
The
you said
silence can
applause.
feel like a call out. Good catch.
Applause.
The first thing you can do is just up your volume. Pop the volume a notch. See if the change in sound in the room is enough to bring those people back. If that doesn't work, what might be 1 level up on the scale?
Okay.
Make them stand up.
You can bring them.
Make them stand in the corner?
You can maybe.
It's about a 12 on the 1 to 10 scale.
You can maybe ask them a question or
Right.
use their name in your dialogue to see if that get their attention.
You could.
Is that too far?
It's a bit risky depending on who they are. Some people will get the picture, respectfully own that they were checked out, participate. Others will think, don't call me out in front of the group.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for me. That felt a bit teacher-student and I didn't like it. You have to be really careful with using people's names to call them back in. So the next notch up on the management scale would be my demo that I just did. Little eye connection, little movement toward. Eye connection alone, 3, 4. Eye connection plus movement toward, 4, 5. What would be a level up from there? Now,
Pause.
Tim.
The pause.
The pause. Silence cures most distracting
Stare at her.
behaviors. Sarah and Ron, can you start having a sidebar?
Yeah, so actually.
You have to
I had
decide
that
in
day
the
afterward
moment
myself.
where you're
Yeah,
going
you're
to
the one
go
who
on the
leads
aggressiveness
in that
scale.
direction.
If it's not distracting you, let it go.
But I have to go to
If
the
it's
back door,
distracting the
I was
other
talking about the
people,
parents, like,
intervene.
mine's
Maybe you could
not
pick up a
problem.
computer for me too.
Oh, maybe I could do it.
I'd like 3.
About 4 seconds. Now, they kind of knew it was coming. We staged that a bit. Doesn't take long for that
No,
silence to
didn't.
really settle in. Patience. It can feel aggressive. The minute people respond, break the eye connection and move on with grace and poise. What you wouldn't want to do.
It's dirty.
The eyebrows. Eyebrows, I've got the hip out, I've got attitude all day long. That looks aggressive. So be really aware in that pause what you're going to do with your body. And it may just be, what other questions do you have? Now I've opened it up, the pause came naturally, and it was just enough to bring Sarah and Ron back. Notice how I don't say does anyone have any questions? Have you picked up on that?
Mhm.
Why do I do that?
So I do that as well as a facilitator, and I was taught when I was told sort of to do that, is that what questions assumes that people do, and it's a little bit more open. When you say, do you have any? And it's a little more closing,
Love
but
it.
just that slight change in the phrase. Like, what questions can I answer? People are like, oh, actually, I do have some.
You got it, it's open-ended.
Yeah.
If you have a quiet group and say, does anyone have any questions?
Super
Or
personal.
just, any questions? You give them the option to say,
Yes, sir.
oh, we're good.
Yeah, 'cause it's personal then.
I know.
Right.
It's funny. I've
What
always
you're
thought
talking
that.
Questions you have
Questions can I
assumes they
answer?
have some. It also makes you appear very open to the question instead of hoping they don't ask. But back to the managing the behaviors. Decide on that scale what you're going to use, if anything. Every one of those skills, with the cleaning up and packing, the technology, the sidebars, zoning out, even a sleeper. Anyone ever had a sleeper?
I've seen sleepers.
Not since
You
my
know those
training
coffee talks?
days. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That we have with Art? Someone was sleeping in one time. Oh my goodness.
It's really
Yeah.
tough.
But in the closed
It's
room
tough
of
not to
luncheon-
take personally. The sleeper, I have to say, unless that sleeper is, I mean this, snoring, or like, there's some sort of noise or distracting visible element to that, let it go. You don't know what they've been through. They may have been up all night with the baby. They may have an ailing parent. They may have, or their house closing might be tomorrow and they've had to pull all their stuff together all night long. You have no idea what is causing that fatigue. Let it go. Don't take it personally. You could try some skills of movement. That person will likely be really embarrassed if they feel called out. Let it go.
Till their head hits the table.
No, I let it go.
Yeah.
Yes, Sarah.
So one thing you haven't mentioned, and maybe this is more because I have a facilitation background, not a sort of presentation background, but I've answered a lot of questions with questions, and we never really talked about that. So, not to cheat, but I was looking at Ron's question for me so I could be prepared later on if I got it. And I thought to myself, the first thing I would do, like naturally, is put that back on him and say, well, what do you think? So the question is, what would happen if I didn't change? Well, Ron, what do you think would happen?
I don't know, what do you think?
I suppose that could happen, but that would have been my very first response would have been.
He's been great with the sound effects. Sometimes I
So you're just
My perception of that is that you don't know exactly how to answer, so you're diverting. That's my perception.
Really?
Other people may not share that.
And
Let's
I'd be
hear
like,
from the
deep
group.
down, Ron, I think you know the answer to this. Why are you even asking me?
Let's take it outside.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
And then go to the next.
Gloves
one.
on.
Okay.
I'd tread gently
Okay,
with it.
all right.
To me, it looks like a diversion from the rest of you.
I think it depends on the question. So in that particular question, based on what she presented, I get it. She wants, because in this scenario, if we were in change management training or whatever we
Mhm.
were doing, you would have, the whole thing would have been about that answer. So I
Right.
get like how, like if we were in the true pretend zone,
Right.
you could have done that.
Or like you as a leader, Ron, why do you think we need to change? You're a
Right.
people leader here in this organization heading towards Vision 2020. Why do you think we need to change?
But it would be like
Okay.
assuming we were in
Right.
that environment.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
No hard, fast rule.
Okay.
Be cautious in that moment that it really is the providing of thoughtful conversation. If you want to use that tool to spark some lively conversation, your Q&A, go for it. Think about it before you use it. If it could feel like a diversion, avoid it.
Yeah, I've always just been sort of, it's very Socratic to me. I think the answers are in the room for the most part. I think they have them and they just need to get them out. So, but it's just, I think the mindset I have is a little different from what I did in the past.
What questions do you have about Q&A?
So you don't have to ask.
I'll think of another one.
Are you ready to practice?
I
Oh,
have one
please.
question. When do you wrap up so that we're done, we're already over time, I know you guys have more questions, I can't be standing here answering all these questions, I want to wrap up.
Are you past your agenda time? Love all the additional questions and lively conversation. To honor everyone's time, we'll wrap now. Everyone knows how to reach me via email. I do have an extra 10 minutes, 15, before I have to be to my next meeting. Happy to stay after and address any questions one-on-one. Thank you all for your input, your insights. I appreciate all your time and attention today. Done. Sticking to your agenda is really critical. This comes back to reputation management. If you are the person who lets Q&A go and loses track of time, you will start getting these difficult behaviors. You also want to be the person who follows through on what you've said. If you're squeezing people to now they only have 3 minutes to get to their next meeting, and oh, he's at 1:45, it's 1:55, but put him in the position. Make yourself available after, honor your agenda, keep track of your timing. What other questions do you have? Let's try it. Last taping of the day. Here's how it's going to work. Everyone gets taped. You all wrote questions down for one another after the 3 to 5 minute conversations. Pull those out. As the speaker, you're going to deliver your closing. Opinion, action, benefits. Open it up for questions. What questions do you have? Be the listener. Use the questions you've written to be the speaker's potential listeners. Ask the questions that you've written down. Speaker, use the skills you've learned. Stay open, be brief, answer to all, check back in. Use ARC if it gets challenging. Acknowledge, respond, connect back to benefits. A few of you are going to be the lucky recipients of a bonus element. I'll draw your names out of the stack of SD cards. If I choose your card, you'll be asked to leave the room before you deliver your closing. The rest of us will decide what distracting behavior we're going to plant in the room. During your answer, you'll have to both manage the skills and manage the distracting behavior. Questions? Who's first?